Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show once again. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. Winter weather advisories continue through tonight here for the Alaska Range, especially through the passes eastward toward Toe Cutoff, and then also for the Upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country. Same thing, winter weather advisory through tonight until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for both areas there, all those areas. Look for additional snowfall, several more inches will fall, and gusty winds, creating visibilities down to a half mile or less at times in those areas. Otherwise, no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere else around the state for tonight and tomorrow. Looking at satellite imagery, this is the area of clouds that brought the second or third shot of snow in across south central Alaska today, several inches falling, and as much as 4 to 7 inches fell in the Copper River Basin during the day today. It looked like Glen Allen and Gulkana, that observing site, picked up at least 4 to 5 inches there, and still snowing in these areas, tapering off, ending, some sunshine breaking out south central Alaska. Not too bad up here to the north, and again areas of snow extending just about all the way up to Eagle. Upper trough up here over the Chukchi Sea, producing clouds and light snow here across from about Cape Lisburne, maybe Point Lay, down along the northwest coast, northern Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait, all the way down to St. Lawrence Island. And that's a cold upper low. That's going to be tracking right down to the south and then swing eastward here over the next 24 to 30 hours. And that's going to be pulling quite cold, bone-chilling cold air in behind that. Already have a lot of cold air plunging southward here across the Bering Sea. Temperature in the teens today. Pribilof Island, ice edge moving southward. And rain and snow still, circulation here. Low pressure keeping the milder air in over Adak and Atka. But to the west, snow. To the east, snowfall levels at sea level. And you'll see snow all the way to sea level here for Adak and Atka over the next couple of hours, if not sooner. And main system pushing through the Panhandle, and then other trough bringing another shot of showers in. Mostly rainfall, temperatures upper 30s to or lower 40s here this afternoon across the Panhandle. Strong winds, northern southeast coast, 50 to 55 miles an hour at Skagway, and Lynn Canal seeing gusts 45 miles an hour at Eldred Rock. Those starting to come down now. And gusty winds, as this low slowly tracks eastward, kicked into Seward. Gusts 35 miles an hour today. Same thing at Homer. West-southwest winds gusting up to 35, 40 miles an hour there. And Augustine Island had gusts of 50 miles an hour. And those two are starting to come down this afternoon as somewhat higher pressure builds in. And then winds tend to lighten up here as the approach of a system coming down from the northwest. And then they'll pick up again once that passes on through. And not too bad Kodiak Island. Some clouds there. Isolated snow showers, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and rain and snow showers, central Aleutians. Cold high pressure here over the Russian Far East. You can see this north to south flow here. This is the leading edge of another really cold air mass coming southward from the Arctic there. Otherwise, low complex here, keeping the snow in over the southeast interior. Rain changing to showers of the Panhandle tonight. Mostly rain south, a mixture of central areas, snow to the north, and snow here. North Gulf Coast, still that low center, just south of Montague Island or near Middleton Island or so. And winter weather advisory up into the eastern interior, clearing out, colder, drier, and still a little breezy here, south central Alaska, but nothing too strong. Another surge moisture coming southward here, snow showers of the Pribilofs, but just starting to get into eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. See for tomorrow, still another trough back up here, and actually another one breaking down or coming southward here with snow showers and increasing winds, colder temperatures into the southeast Bering, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. Still could see some blowing snow here over the Copper River Basin and Alaska Range passes, but less snowfall north of the mountains, and snow over the Panhandle. Snow showers, still mixture from, say, Sitka southward across Prince of Wales Island, but those snowfall levels coming down quite rapidly. Then you get a reverse in the trend here, low pressure driving eastward, southeast flow now, so you see warmer temperatures trying to push back in, but enough cold air is going to get in between before this happens that you'll see a mixture of precipitation even over the southern Panhandle, snow in the north, cold, windy conditions east and south of the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, south central Alaska, Mananuska Valley. Could see gusts 35 to 50 miles an hour, but no wind here. Cold temperatures, high pressure entrenched, Arctic high pressure, really cold temperatures once again in overall interior Alaska. Lows for tonight, 25 to 45 below, coldest eastern North Slope Arctic coast. And you see back below zero here, Bristol Bay and the southwest down to single numbers. Even south central Alaska here, cold air coming in, but staying in the 30s above freezing for the southeast coast. And then highs tomorrow, not much different. Mid to upper 30s for your highs. Teens, south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, a shade above or below zero here west of the Alaska Range all the way out to the coast. Below zero, Tanana Valley, way below zero for the North Slope. And the lows on Wednesday morning, anywhere from 5 to 20 below here for south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula up into the Sitna Valley, and 25 to 40 below, say for the Tanana Valley, and 45, 50 below up over the northeast, and in the 20s finally for the Panhandle, followed by highs in the mid to upper 30s there for the southeast coast. Teens, southern Alaska, below zero.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, I've got IFR and marginal VFR coming in bands and surges here into the western and possibly central interior. A little bit better VFR, at least to start here. Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, on up and across all the eastern interior. IFR on the increase, especially tomorrow afternoon here, will be expanding westward over the Copper River Basin, and looking something like that as that cold upper trough digs southward and we start getting more lift to the atmosphere, southwest flow. Moisture will appear to be backing westward here, and so IFR will be coming with it, possibly as far west as maybe Turnagain Arm, Chugach Mountains by tomorrow afternoon. Definitely Copper River Basin, marginal across most of southern Alaska. VFR and marginal to the north, northern Bering Sea, mostly VFR, Aleutians, Pribilofs, Alaska Peninsula, marginal, and the Panhandle, marginal VFR with some isolated areas of IFR, mainly over toward the border. And for Wednesday morning, not much change over the southeast coast. And then with that next trough coming down, the colder air and a little more lift in the atmosphere, it's going to hold IFR with snow here over the Copper River Basin, cutting off right around the Chugach, becoming VFR to the west here, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley. Probably not the Mananuska, at least not right away. IFR, snow over the eastern interior, all the way up to the eastern North Slope Arctic coast. Marginal VFR, isolated IFR possible out here to the west into Bristol Bay. Bering Sea, not too bad. Some VFR areas there. Nunivak Island, Atka, over to Nikolsky. Pribilofs, though, all that cold air coming out over the open water, picking moisture up. So marginal VFR there, marginal out to the west. And for Wednesday afternoon, VFR now for the Pribilofs and central eastern Aleutians. Another system pushing some IFR up into the far western Aleutians there, but generally VFR here, northern Bering Sea, all the western interior into the central interior. Marginal VFR hanging on along and north of the Alaska Range, so 40-mile country, mid and upper Tanana Valley. Marginal VFR, but no IFR. Marginal eastern Gulf of Alaska from about Cordova to Yakutat and Delphin Cove, and then this band of IFR there over toward the border along the Panhandle, otherwise marginal. And for passes Anatuvik and Adigan, occasionally marginal tomorrow. Not all that bad, but I don't think it'll be VFR the entire day, kind of oscillating back and forth. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR pretty likely on both western approaches, otherwise east of the mountains, VFR and rainy, north side marginal and southern entrance VFR. Windy, I'm sorry, let me back that up. Western entrance of rainy, marginal, and eastern entrance VFR. Now windy, south side probably VFR, otherwise occasionally marginal at times, trending down in the afternoon. And Isabel, IFR the entire day. In fact, conditions will definitely be lower in the afternoon than in the morning. And Mentasta starting out marginal, becoming IFR as moisture increases. And Tanita, same trend, starting out marginal VFR, becoming IFR as that moisture builds westward with the snow. And Portage, VFR becoming marginal VFR in the later part of the afternoon. Chilcoot and White, occasionally marginal, optimistically. And for the freezing levels at the surface here, up to about Cordova, Cape Yakataga, over the northern panhandle, 2,000 feet though, down almost south of the Queen Charlottes now. That's about it, freezing level wise here, surface right along the central western Aleutians. Icing, some areas of light to very isolated, considerable moderate, probably no moderate at all out here, kind of a mixed icing pattern of the light variety there above about 4,000 feet, otherwise pretty dry over the interior. And the southeast coast, better chance of isolated, considerable moderate here over the panhandle. And actually that's going to be pulling back to the northwest in the afternoon hours. Jet stream. Today, this upper level low today is up here over the Arctic. Check CC. It's going to be dropping right on down. Cold northerly winds coming with it, spreading over the interior, and 9,000 feet, 40 knotters here over the 40 to 45 knots here along the eastern Bering Sea and the west coast there, turning westerly Kodiak. 3,000 feet, about the same pattern, a little lighter on the winds and turbulence-wise. Look for moderate chop. Kamishak Bay through Kamishak Gap, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula. West side here up to the Seward Peninsula and the southern southeast coast. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
I can't really name anyone that has so much integrity as she does to the things that she's accomplishing. It's pretty amazing. Having Claire as a role model, just a strong woman in science and just so smart and so kind. It's just a huge confidence booster. Is that, hey, I could do that too, you know? That's possible, that's successful, that's what I want to do.
I would characterize her as a pioneer in the field.
The amount and quality of the work she's put out is second to none.
I know people who have a lot of tenacity. I know people that have integrity, but it's rare that people have both together in that, that combination that Claire does.
Every morning, Dr. Claire Parkinson gets up before sunrise and runs 2 miles to work. She hasn't missed a day in nearly 40 years. To know the evolution of sea ice and how we observe it from space is to know Claire. This year, she's celebrating 40 years at NASA.
When I arrived at Goddard, which was in July of 1978, it was an incredibly exciting period here. Satellites were pretty new, but a lot of data had been collected.
NASA scientists were inundated with information, and Claire was in a cohort looking at sea ice, trying to make sense of a jumble of very raw, very new data. It was around that time that Claire and her team, at the time led by Dr. Jay Zwally, created the principal sea ice record that we use today. How does something like that record help you do your job?
Oh, that record is fundamental to understanding sea ice. So without it, we wouldn't know how rapidly it's changing.
You may not realize it, but Claire's work studying the changing extent of the ice caps deeply affected our understanding of climate change, and relatedly, our understanding of how climate change affects life on Earth.
One of the clearest signals for climate change that resonates with people has been this shrinking of the polar ice cap in the summer that we're able to see because of Claire's work.
After we had a record that was about 15, 20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
Sea ice is formed on the surface of the ocean, and therefore is made from seawater. The biggest concentration is in the Arctic, and it's also where the biggest loss in sea ice is occurring. Every year, NASA reports on the sea ice minimum and maximum extents. As expected, the data is concerning.
By now, not only has this trend toward lesser ice continued, but it's even accelerated, so that now the decreases are greater than what they had been.
These trends are deeply troubling, but one thing's for sure. Our awareness of shrinking sea ice extent due to climate change was propelled faster and further after Claire Parkinson arrived at NASA.
I mean, she takes her job seriously, and the health and welfare of those instruments in space, yeah, she's on it. You know, it's one of the things you don't worry about because Claire's in the loop on these things. It's going to be fine.
In science, we stand on the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of those who explored before us. But then, some among us are giants.
For a scientist, it's incredibly exciting to be studying these glaciers and ice sheets right now because they're doing something that hasn't happened in thousands of years. We're watching changes take place that haven't happened since the end of the last ice age. Tuesday was cold, I almost froze my toes. Oh, what's it gonna be next week? Who knows? That's climate. Oh, that's the climate you got. You take a bunch of weather and you average it together and you're doing the climate rock.
At a glacial pace, it means something's happening so slowly you can barely tell it's happening at all. That used to describe the very incremental movement glaciers and ice sheets experienced each year. But now that's changing. We're tagging along with 3 NASA scientists to understand the different lengths they go to not only investigate ice sheets and glaciers, but also communicate their often complicated science to the public. First, let's get oriented. Ice sheets, in pink, pretty much occur in only 2 places, Antarctica and Greenland. Glaciers, in yellow, play a key role draining melt off the ice sheet. Glaciers are also found in the high mountains, but we'll get to those in another episode.
So we know that something's happening in Greenland right now that's unprecedented in the last several thousand years.
That's Dr. Josh Willis, oceanographer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Josh and his team are tackling one of the major environmental challenges of the 21st century, trying to answer fundamental questions about how melting glaciers impact sea level rise.
With my mission, Oceans Melting Greenland, or OMG for short, we're trying to understand just how much of Greenland's melt is caused by the oceans.
Along with being one of NASA's top scientists working on the cryosphere, Josh is passionate about demystifying climate change in typically unconventional ways.
I think by reaching out to people with a little bit of humor, a little bit of fun, maybe a song, you really have the opportunity to help people understand and come to terms with what we're doing to our planet. Because it's definitely happening and it's definitely a big deal, and we need to start preparing for it.
Down at the opposite pole, Dr. Kelly Brunt is getting ready for a major expedition.
In December and January this coming year, I'll actually be in Antarctica down near the South Pole collecting ground-based GPS data.
This is actually Kelly's second expedition to the South Pole. The first occurred in December and January of last year. Both surveys are critical and will help validate data collected by NASA's airborne campaign, Operation Icebridge, and the recently launched satellite mission ISAT-2.
All 3 of these layers, that ground-based, that airborne, and the satellite, are all tied together. The ground-based helps validate both the satellite and the airborne helps give us more validation data for the satellites, but also a bigger story with respect to the depth of the ice sheet and what's going on underneath the surface.
While some scientists are taking measurements in the field, others are looking for answers in physics and lines of code.
For me, those projections that we are doing, they do have a very personal meaning.
Dr. Sophie Nowicki is an ice sheet modeler. That means she and her team have the important job of forecasting how ice will change in the future, which also predicts changes in sea level rise. It's a job she doesn't take lightly, especially since urban planning and infrastructure use her team's models to make decisions about the future and safety of their communities.
When we make those projections that are 100 years in the future, 100 years can seem so far away, like I don't have to worry about it, it's just too far. But actually they are not. It's really like the future that we are looking at that our children or grandchildren will see to experience.
Whether it's learning to communicate in new ways, traversing a swath of Antarctica in a massive piston bully, or taking responsibility for an impactful climate forecast, our NASA explorers are pushing the limits of discovery every day. But on a very human level, they're people with families and friends who have a stake in finding out why and how the planet is changing as rapidly as it is.
Every place, at least so far, that we have found life, we found water along with it. And so when we try to understand the thresholds for life, where life might exist elsewhere in our solar system and the universe, water is one of those things that we look for.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at coastal water forecasts. Tuesday, southeast coast. Outer coastline, west winds 25 knots, seas around 18 feet. Lighter winds on the north coast, west at 20. Lynn Canal, lighter winds than today there for the northern inside waters. South 20, seas 4 feet. And kind of a variable wind pattern at 5 to 15 knots for the central southern inside waters. And then for Wednesday, small craft advisories, Clarence Strait, southerlies back up to 30 knots, seas building to 6 feet, southeast 20, Stevens Passage, and northerlies, sustained northerlies at 35 knots. That's good for gale warnings for Lynn Canal, seas 7 feet, and east to south winds on the south coast, 30 knots, and southwest 30 to 35 knots here for the north coast, and those seas 13 to 14 feet. Northern Cook Inlet tomorrow, light northerly winds at 10 knots, but small craft advisory south of the Forelands, north 25. Prince William Sound, good stiff northerly wind, higher gusts out of northern bays or western northern bays with seas 6 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, west winds 30 knots. Gale warnings here for the western North Gulf Coast, northwest increasing to 35 knots. 40 knots out of the northwest for the Barren Islands. Storm warnings for Kamishak Bay. West 50 knots, and some of that probably is going to blow into Kachemak Bay. And then for Wednesday, northwest 45 for Kamishak Bay, northwest 40, Barren Islands, north 35 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, and just under the gale threshold there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, both locations north 30 knots. And winds stay light, actually for Cook Inlet here, coming down to 20 knots out of the north, south of the Forelands. Kodiak Island, gale warnings, west-northwest, 35 to 40 knots there, 13-foot seas, and north to northwest, 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, northwest, 30 knots. Outlook for Wednesday, northwesterlies, 30 to 35 knots. Heavy freezing spray in these marine areas here as a much colder air mass drops in on these winds, and 40-knot winds from Castle Cape on all of Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, sustained northwest 40 knots, higher gust seas anywhere from 8 to 13 feet. And for the Fox Islands, north to northwest, 25 knots, seas running 8 feet or so. Lighter winds for the central Aleutians here, north to northwest at 20 knots, and even lighter out west under high pressure, north at 15. Then system approaches here off to the southwest, so back into the gales, east-southeasterlies. 35 knots, western Aleutians, Adak and Atka, southeast coming up to 25, and Unamak Island there, north at 15, but Unalaska Island, northwest, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 to 30. And for the southwest coast, brisk wind advisories tomorrow, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots, and brisk wind advisories also for St. Lawrence Island, west at 25. Then that falls back to about 15 out of the northwest for Norton Sound, and small craft advisories here, St. Matthew Island, and the Pribilofs for north winds at 25 knots, seas 7 feet. Lighter winds in store here for the northern Bering Sea on Wednesday, west 10 St. Lawrence Island, and 20 to 25 now for the southwest coast, and northwest 25, 7-foot seas, heavy freezing spray here for the Pribilofs. And from Wales to Cape Lisburne tomorrow, northwesterlies at 20 knots. Otherwise, pretty light winds here, mainly west 5 to 15 knots, western Beaufort Sea coast, and then variable at 5 to 10 for the eastern stretch of the coastline to demarcation point. And Wednesday, westerlies 10 to 15 here for the eastern coast. Central coast, light winds, light and variable, and south at 10, and then kind of a variable wind direction here from Wales up to, say, Cape Lisburne at 10 to 15 knots. For tonight, snow continues to diminish here, and colder temperatures push into south central Alaska, and below zero temperatures come into Bristol Bay tonight, below zero all the way up to the Arctic coast, and a mixture of precipitation in the Panhandle, depending on where you are, which tomorrow should be mostly snow, except maybe extreme south, but that'll turn to snow eventually and then taper off. Still looking at snow and windy conditions for the Alaska Range Copper River Basin, but not as much as today as far as snowfall goes. Windy here, Kodiak Island, and that gradient tightens here as cold high pressure builds into the central interior, dominating just about all of interior Alaska, as well as eastern Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And storminess begins to spread, definitely spreads moisture and warmer temperatures back into the southern panhandle, and trying to pull eastward here along the eastern North Gulf Coast. That's all I have time for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.